So we're about ready to roll with our next presenter, who is Pete Jacobson. Again, we met Pete. We go back a long way. Meeting at the National Coaches Convention. He's right by me in New York. So Pete Jacobson on building a dominant culture and doing it quickly. Edgemont, New York head coach and the founder of Win Smarter. So Pete Jacobson has been a varsity high school coach in New York for almost 20 years. He also works with coaches of all levels through Win Smarter to help them get better at what they do, have a greater impact, and go home happy. Check out the 10 insanely powerful tactics for an amazing team culture, for some of the most unique, impactful tactics you can use to build a championship culture quickly. Pete Jacobson, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate having you.
Thanks. Thanks, Gene. Appreciate it, man. Saw some names I recognize in the audience. So for those of you who know me, great to see you all here. So just a couple things. As Gene mentioned, I've been coaching at Edgemont High School here in New York for about 20 years. We'll get into a little bit more about that for a second. I run a website called winsmarter.com that helps coaches build their programs. Before we jump into our topic today, building a dominant culture, doing it quickly, just a couple of things. This is being recorded, so you'll have access to watch this session again later, and we'll get that, Gene or myself or someone will get that information out to you. The questions, if you have them, please put them in the Q&A box below. I'll try to take some time at the end to answer any questions that you have. Also, I'm going to share, let you guys know how I'm going to share these slides with you and a bunch of other useful resources, and get to that in a second. So let's jump in. We're going to talk about building a dominant culture, doing it quickly, but we're going to get more specifically into some tips, some tactics, some strategies you can use to make that happen in your program also. I think it's important to give a little context and kind of understand kind of my story with our program a little bit. So like I said, I've been coaching at Edgemont High School in New York for about 20 years. This will be my 20th year coming up. I actually went to Edgemont High School. I wrestled there. So I can tell you, we did not have much of a wrestling tradition in our program. The nicest way I can say it is we sucked. We kind of sucked. And I graduated from college. My full-time job, I'm a New York City firefighter. So I was able to get my schedule in such a way that I could help out coach back at our high school when they needed a coach. And so this is me, 23 years old, just started coaching, a young, frustrated Pete. My first year of coaching, we had 8 kids on our roster. In fact, 2 of them actually weren't even medically cleared the first day. So we had like 6 kids practicing. One of them didn't have wrestling shoes. 2 of them ended up quitting before the season even ended. So we didn't have a single kid qualify for our postseason, for our sectionals, I should say. Do the math, right? 6 kids. We couldn't win a single dual meet, even if we wrestled the best matches of our lives, which we didn't. And even more importantly than that, like the kids we had were kind of they didn't have a lot of commitment. They'd make excuses. They'd not show up sometimes. They were kind of selfish and out for themselves. And it was frustrating. But I was young and arrogant, and I didn't know what I didn't know. I thought I knew it all, right? We can all relate to that. So I jumped in and I said, I could turn this around. So I focused on our practices and our technique and our drilling and our live wrestling and our strength and conditioning. And the problem is nothing changed. Nothing significant anyway. I get frustrated. We keep having the same problems every year. I felt like I was like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. Actually, hang on one second. I don't know how well you guys can see that screen. Let me fix that. All right. I felt like I was Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. Like the same thing happened year after year after year, and it was so frustrating. I'm sure you guys can relate to that. So I reached a point where I literally would have tried anything to help make our program better. So started reading, started doing some research, started talking to a lot of smart coaches. And eventually, through a lot of our own trial and error, we started to figure some things out. And it grew from there to the point where our program has become a lot more successful than it used to be. We've won 7 league championships in the last 10 years. We've had about a dozen all-state wrestlers. We've had 3 New York State champions, kids going on to wrestle in college. So things went in a positive direction, but it took a while to get there. So The problem that I eventually realized is that the actual wrestling wasn't our biggest problem, right? And I'm sure that a lot of you can relate to this. It wasn't our technique we were showing. It wasn't the way we ran our strength and conditioning, our practices. It was more of this intangible stuff like getting enough kids on our roster and keeping them engaged, a lack of commitment and motivation, just kind of the selfishness and entitlement and all about me type of attitude that we like see and hear about more and more. You know, our kids being kind of soft and not having the mental toughness, just like kind of quitting on themselves when things got rough. And so it's the solutions to this kind of stuff that we're going to talk about this morning. So before we jump in, and I mentioned this before, don't panic. There's going to be a lot of great stuff we're going to share today, and I want to make this as valuable as possible. So I don't want you to be so caught up in taking notes, and you might miss something. We're going to get you covered. I wanted to let you know. Also, because I only have limited time today, I might not actually get to everything. So I wanted to let you know we've got you covered with that also. Right now, if you want to make your life easier, if you want to shoot me a text at that number with your name and your email address, when we're done today, I'll send you out all of my slides. I'll send you out an ebook with kind of detailed step-by-step descriptions of all the strategies we talk about. And I'll send you a bunch of other resources to help you implement this stuff. So that's the number you can text. That's my email address right there. I'll put this up again at the very end if you don't get a chance to copy it now. But let's jump back in and talk about these kinds of problems that we're dealing with. So here was the issue for us. Tell me if you can relate to this. As coaches, we are typically like doers, right? We are like men and women of action. So when we see a problem, we attack that problem. You know, that's kind of how most of us have been brought up. That's how we were trained. We need more kids on the team. We go and throw up posters around the school. We feel our kids are lacking in commitment. We give, another pump up speech before practice. Our kids aren't tough enough. We make practices tougher so they'll adapt and improve. We attack the problem directly. The problem is a lot of these solutions that we use to attack these problems are really just Band-Aids. We're attacking the problems directly, but usually the same problems keep popping back up. And we never really get these problems to go away because we're not getting to the root of them. We're not getting to the foundation of what's actually causing these problems in the first place. So let's talk about that foundation, right? That foundation for our purposes essentially is the culture in your program. So to solve the issues that we've all had to deal with, right? Things like attitude, toughness, roster size, commitment. The most effective way that we've found to tackle these problems is to not actually try to tackle the problems directly, but to drop down a level to focus on our culture. What we realized in our program was that our culture was actually the foundation that all this other stuff was built on. If we had a strong foundation, then these problems largely just kind of took care of themselves. So gradually over time, as we started to figure this stuff out, we started to focus more of our time and effort on building this amazing culture in our program, and it really started paying off for us. So why is culture important? I mean, we talked about a couple of reasons, and it's dealing with a lot of these issues that I would bet most of us feel at least one of these things is something that's holding our programs back, either recruitment and retention, commitment and motivation, having a team first attitude, developing kids that are mentally tough and competitive. So the $1 million question becomes, how do I create, I get it, but how do I create this positive dominant culture that gets results and solves these types of problems? So we're going to get into a little bit now about what's worked for us. I certainly don't claim to be any kind of guru or to have all the answers, but I do know that we've tried a lot of stuff, and I can tell you what's worked for us and I can tell you what hasn't worked for us. So hopefully here we can skip you past some of the stuff that hasn't worked and on to some of the stuff that has been effective for us. So we're going to get you some really specific strategies, stuff that will work great for you right now. But before we do that, I think it's important to give you a little bit of context. So I'm going to give you like this quick 2-minute crash course in kind of the two main pillars that have completely turned around our culture. And then we'll talk about how you can make that a part of your program also. So I think it's important to understand that we came to these two ideas, like I said, through a lot of trial and error and figuring out what actually worked for us. It wasn't something we just that was revealed to us one day, that we had this epiphany. but it kind of slowly came into focus for us over time. And now that we really focus on these two concepts, change has been huge for us. So it's easy now to kind of look back and say, well, it was these two pillars that really made the difference. But at the time, it was a lot more foggy than that. So I'm gonna take a quick second now to clarify things and explain these pillars to you. So hopefully you can skip past a lot of that trial and error and frustration that we had, and you'll understand the why behind the strategies we're going to talk about. So it'll hopefully help you come up with even more ideas to continue building the culture of your program. So we'll talk about each of these pillars quickly. The first pillar is creating an environment that kids love to be a part of. So another way to say that is creating a culture of caring in your program, an environment where your kids really care about each other and where they know that their coaches really care about them. So I know that some of you are probably like rolling your eyes at me through your computer right now. And I get it. This is wrestling, right? This is not some like nursery school sing along. We're trying to build these hardened warriors that we're sending out on the mat to battle, to be tested in every way possible. But check this out. Stick with me for a second. When we talk about an environment kids love to be a part of, and when we talk about a culture of caring, check this out. When we focus on that, it built this much deeper level of commitment and motivation in our wrestlers. So if your wrestlers love each other, they want to spend more time together. When we made that shift, our kids just wanted to spend more time together each day. They started showing up early. They started staying late. They started working harder. They started showing up more in the off season to get better year round. Because who doesn't want to spend more time doing something they like doing with people that they like doing it with, right? So for many of our kids, this kind of culture was a real like gateway drug almost to get them to develop true intrinsic motivation later on in their careers that really drove them to excel. This culture of caring has also done a ton to create mental toughness and competitiveness in our program. So if you think about it, right, one of the biggest reasons that kids choke in competitive situations is because they're so focused on the outcome. And while most kids will never admit it, what psychology tells us is, and studies have shown, is that for adolescents, a big part of that focus on outcome is because they feel like their status or their worth on our team is tied to their outcomes, whether they win or lose. So if you haven't noticed this, most teenagers are pretty concerned about their self-image and what other people think about them. So that puts this great importance that they're placing on outcome. But, and this is kind of the important thing to realize in a shift, when kids on your team know that their teammates love them and care about them and their coaches love them and care about them, regardless of outcome, they're no longer concerned as much about their value and self-worth being tied to the outcome of their matches. When they know that their relationships and their status in the program aren't dependent upon their wins and losses, it's like this huge psychological weight is lifted off their shoulders, and they're suddenly free to compete fearlessly and relentlessly because they're not worried about all that other crap. So the other big way, from a mental toughness perspective, the other big way that kids tend to demonstrate a lack of mental toughness is quitting on themselves in tough situations, right? We've all been there. Like, it's a tough match. It could go either way. We're kind of right there. And then our kid just crumbles and we lose the match. Like, tell me that's not one of the most frustrating, like, coaching moments you can have. So here's what we found and what we discovered, right? When the kids in our team really care about each other, when the kids really care about their teammates, suddenly when they're out there competing, it's about more than just them. They're internalizing, even if it's subconsciously, this concept that, like, I'm doing this for these guys that I love and they love me. And when kids make that shift, it's almost impossible for them to quit on themselves because they feel like it's no longer just about them, that they're part of this bigger thing. So the reality is, almost counterintuitively, right, creating this soft, so to speak, culture of caring has made our kids so much tougher on the mat. Team first attitude, right? It creates kids who are all about the team. So it's really easy, especially in a sport like wrestling, an individual sport, for kids to get really caught up in themselves. Selfishness, entitlement, again, like that all about me attitude, it seems to be everywhere. The single best way that we found to combat it is creating a culture where kids care about each other, because suddenly it becomes effortless for them to put the team first because they care about their teammates. And last but not least, kids gravitate. You want to talk about recruitment and retention? Kids gravitate towards environments where they feel cared about and environments they love to be a part of. And that's helped us a ton with getting more kids to come out for our team. We had the largest varsity roster we've ever had this past year. And it keeps kids engaged when they're enjoying being a part of it and they feel like they're cared about. And here's the important thing. It keeps them engaged even when they're not winning a lot, because they feel like they're still enjoying it, they're valued, and they're having a good experience. So when kids find this kind of environment, not only do they tend to stick with it, but they tell their friends about it and they bring their friends. And that's what we've experienced in our program. And the other benefit there is parents see it, right? What more can a parent really want for their kid than knowing that their kid is in an environment where the other adults around them really care about their well-being, right? Parents see it and parents talk to each other. And I know in a community like ours, a small community, parents talking to each other is probably the single best recruiting tool we have. So our program developed this kind of reputation in our town, and kids started flocking to us. Second pillar, and I'm trying to fly through this quick. Make it about more than just wrestling. So basically that means you want to really make it clear to everyone involved in your program, right? Your coaches, your wrestlers, your parents, even your administrators, that your program is deeper than just wrestling, that it's really helping equip your kids to be successful in life and off the mat as well as on the mat. So the idea here really is to come up with some kind of core values that, to build your program on. Values that are meaningful to you, values that you think are important, values that you can get your whole program to kind of rally behind. So for us, right, something we like to say in our program all the time is that our program is about building champions on the mat and in life. That's kind of like a sentence that gets thrown out a lot in our program. And our core values, we have core values too. They kind of evolve over time. But this past year, for example, our core values were habits, improvement, accountability, family, and joy. Those were our 5 core values. And we built our program around that. So taking a quick look at how that pillar can impact this stuff, right? You want to talk about commitment and motivation, right? We're now giving kids a greater purpose for them to latch onto. And that's especially important, like we talked about, for the kids who aren't always winning, right? It allows them to attach more meaning and importance to what they're doing. It's about more than just wrestling. It allows them to make this connection between what they're getting right now from wrestling and how it's going to benefit them for the rest of their lives. So especially for your more cerebral kids, like that really has a huge impact on their commitment levels. Talking about recruitment and retention, right? Kids and their parents, again, going back to parents, they'll see what you're all about, right? And how you're helping them find success in all parts of their lives, how success in wrestling is directly connected to success in other aspects of your life, the qualities that can make you successful on the wrestling mat are the same characteristics that'll help you be successful elsewhere. So it goes a long way, especially for parents, right? We have a lot of parents in our community that have zero exposure to wrestling. In fact, all they have is these negative misconceptions about, they knew that one kid in high school that jogged around in a rubber suit, was spitting in a cup all day and had ringworm. They don't want their kids to be a part of that. Suddenly when you're like, no, we're giving your kids a vehicle to become champions off the mat, champions in life. And it goes a long way towards overcoming a lot of those misperceptions about our sport. Mental toughness, right? So kind of similar to what we talked about a minute ago. One of the biggest reasons our kids choke is because they're so focused on the outcome. So over time, when you can really shift their thinking to understand that what they're getting out of wrestling is so much more than just the wins and losses, it starts to put the competition in perspective for them. It lets them reduce the importance of the outcome in their heads, which actually enables them to focus on competing and not worrying about whether they win or lose. So we've seen our kids wrestle so much more fearlessly when they're able to kind of detach the importance of the outcome from why they're wrestling. And again, it's especially for those kids who tend to overthink things. As far as that team first attitude, right? Your values are preaching that. They're hearing it every day. Family, for example, is one of our core values. Serving others, taking care of your teammates. When they're getting that messaging again and again and again, and they're watching their coaches and they're watching their teammates demonstrate those values, it becomes really hard to stay selfish and to stay entitled, because it's become the culture literally around you to put the team first, and everyone buys into it ultimately. Cool. So that's enough context. Those are the 2 pillars right there. We're going to get into some now the rest of the time to some kind of specific strategies that you can roll out in your program to take these ideas and make them a reality. So I'll be honest with you, I got a bunch of great stuff to talk to you guys about, and I don't know if I'm going to get through it all right now. But like I said, I'll throw the information, contact info back up again at the end. I'll get you these slides. I'll get you detailed write-ups of all the strategies that we talk about, and even the ones that we're not able to talk about potentially, and a bunch of other resources. So don't sweat it about that. These are some of the strategies that you can use right now, and we're going to get into that in a second. Each one of them builds on either one or both of those two pillars that we just talked about, and you'll see how as we discuss each one. So the first one we're going to talk about is our poker chip program. So we had these poker chips made up, these custom-made poker chips made up. And again, I can send you out if you give me your information, where we got them from and all that stuff. But, if you look on the one side is our logo, and around the edge, around the perimeter is our 5 core values are written there. Improvement, accountability, habits, family, joy. On the back side, like build is something our kids say, and Panther Tough is kind of like a motto on our team. But here's how we use the poker chips, right? Here's what's pretty cool about them. The first couple of weeks of practice, maybe twice a week, we'll take like 15 minutes before practice, and we'll spend that day just picking out one of those core values and talking about that value. We're making it more than just a word to our kids. We're talking about what that value is, what it means to us exactly, how it'll help them in wrestling, and how it'll help them in the rest of their lives. And now that we've done this for a few years, what's really powerful is we're even able often to have our seniors each talk about one of these values. So we'll talk about one value each day for the first couple of weeks. And then about 2 weeks or so into the season, when our coaches feel like our kids have really internalized and understand what our core values are more than just the words, we'll have after practice one day what our kids call our poker chip ceremony. So this whole thing has become a huge tradition and point of motivation in our program. At this ceremony, after practice that day, we'll tell each kid that they've finally earned their chip. It's kind of like their rite of passage onto the team. So we'll call them up one at a time, give them their chip that they have to hold on to the rest of the season. And so the thing with these chips is they have to carry it with them everywhere at all times. They got to keep it in their pocket, keep it in their wallet. They've got to bring it with them to practice every day. And the idea there is it's a reminder, a physical little token to remind them that they're part of something bigger than themselves, and to remind them that those core values are what are going to drive their success in wrestling and outside of wrestling. So then, there's more to it than that, though, right? They'll have to bring their chips into practice every day. And we actually have one of our managers stand at the door of our wrestling room with a bucket. So every day those kids walk into practice, they got to throw their chip in the bucket. Every kid's got to throw his chip in the bucket. So it's symbolically meaning like they're putting all their chips in the bucket. They're going all in for the team. And then during practice that day, essentially, each practice, they have to earn their chip back that night. So they earn their chip back by working hard. They earn their chip back by really living out and demonstrating those core values. And if they do so, they get their chip back at the end of practice. The other things we do with this that are pretty cool, because this ties back to a lot of other things in our program, is anytime a kid does something that's outstanding, that really demonstrates those core values, they'll earn another chip. So over the course of the season, kids will accumulate more and more chips. They only have to carry one of them around each day, but they'll accumulate more and more chips based on their hard work, their effort, and living out our core values. So then what we do is at the end of the season, our very last practice before the postseason, our kids have to bring all of their chips back to practice. And they walk in the door and they dump their chips in the bucket. And then before we start practice, we have this amazing visual of, guys, at the beginning of the season, this bucket was empty. Now, here we are months later, and because of all of your hard work and commitment and sacrifice, this bucket is overflowing with chips because of your hard work. Like, you guys are clearly prepared for the challenges that lie ahead. So it's a really kind of impactful visual, and it's one of those kind of rituals that have become a really important part of our program. So that's a little bit about the poker chip program. Again, I'm just trying to jump through this stuff to get as much as I can. Our buddy week, that's something else that's been super powerful for us. So, that first strategy, the poker chip strategy, I think it's pretty clear how you see that can tie back to the second pillar of making it about more than just wrestling. Buddy week ties back really well to that first pillar, a culture of caring and creating an environment kids love to be a part of. So our buddy week, we usually do this maybe the second week of practice also. The way this works is our coaches will, ahead of time, we'll pair up each kid on our team. They won't know the pairings, but we'll pair up each kid on our team with another kid on our team. They don't have to be the same weight. We try to actually do different ages together. So what works well for us is we'll typically put like a senior with a sophomore and a junior with a freshman. And they'll walk in one Monday and we'll say, guys, it's buddy week. So we'll announce who's buddies with who, and the kids make a big deal about it. They walk out into the center when they call their names, and they hug it out or shake hands or whatever, because they don't know who their buddy is. We'll try to match together kids who don't really know each other that well, or kids who might not hang out with each other that much outside of wrestling. And in our school, actually, we have multiple lunch periods. So if we can, we'll try to match together kids that have the same lunch period. So we tell them the idea here on Buddy Week is a competition, because we're a competitive team. You need to spend as much time as you possibly can outside of your practice, outside of practices this week with your buddy. And the object is to get to know your buddy as well as you possibly can. So we have fun with it during the week, like during our warm-ups or during conditioning. We'll do certain activities that are like tied to Buddy Week. We'll have like buddy relay races or buddy sprints or buddy carries. We'll make it a competition because these kids are competitive, and they'll kind of play off of that. And then at the end of the week on Friday, we'll have a buddy quiz, we call it, where we literally sit the kids down for 5 minutes and they have to answer some questions about their buddy to see how well they know their buddy. We'll ask them stuff like, what's his middle name? How many siblings does he or she have? Guys, if you could mute yourselves, I hear some guys in the background. If you could mute yourselves, that'd be awesome. We'll ask them, what's his favorite music? What's his worst subject in school? Does he have any pets? That kind of stuff. And then our managers will actually grade it, and like I said, it's a competition. The buddies that know each other the best, we'll give them a prize, like some T-shirts or something. And the ones that know each other the worst, there'll be some kind of fun or funny penalty. Like, for example, we might make them wear the other kid's clothing to practice the next day or something. So why this has been amazing for us is it creates all of these bonds and all of these connections through different kids in our program that wouldn't have them otherwise. And the reason that's important as the season wears on and things, you start dealing with some adversity, is it prevents cliques from forming, because right off the bat, you're establishing all these different connections with different groups, different ages, different weights, kids that wouldn't necessarily be drilling with each other. And it creates this environment of caring and support. Like, it's crazy to see later in the season, like months later, how one kid will be going out of his way to support his buddy. We're like, dude, Buddy Week was like a month ago, but they still feel that bond and those connections. And they're all throughout our program. It creates this like spider web of connection. So that's been super powerful too. I'm looking at the time here. I got time for one more I'm going to give you guys. This is our senior legacy book. This is something we just started doing a few years ago. And honestly, I wish that we'd done this earlier, man. So the way that this works is at the end of our season each year, we'll have our seniors write a letter to the team. The best time to do this, I've found, is either right before the postseason, when kids are kind of really invested, or right after the postseason, when they're kind of like emotional and sentimental about their experience. We'll have them write a letter to the team, but not just the team now and in the future. And we'll have them talk about what the program has meant to them, what they've gotten out of being on our team, what their teammates mean to them. We'll ask them to share like a specific story or anecdote about some of that stuff if they can. And we'll give them like a week to do this, because we'll ask them to really take some time and put some thought into it. We'll help them with it if they need. Sometimes they'll send a draft and we'll be like, dude, you need to put a little more into this. We want it to be about a page. So, a few paragraphs. Some kids will handwrite it. Most kids will type it, but we assemble it into a book. And then what happens is each year we print out the new copy of the book with the new letters that are added to it, and we give it out to our team. We give it out to our parents at our preseason meeting. Now, talk about something powerful, right? You're having these kids read letters from those who came before them, kids that they looked up to, kids that they respected, talking about how much of an impact the program has had on them, how much they love their teammates, how much they care about their program. And it suddenly gives these younger kids who maybe have never had this before, this real sense of like, I'm part of something bigger than myself. Like, I have people watching. Like, what I do is reflected on all these other people. And that can be game changing for a lot of kids. On top of that, right, you show this to parents with all these seniors talking about like how your program is potentially life changing for them. And you've got fans for life in these parents. You've got parents who are like, do whatever you need to do to my kid. You tell me what you need. I got you. So the support from the parents that we've gotten because of this has been huge also. And the kind of last thing I'll share about it that's been really helpful for us is I'll pull out this book before practice on a random Thursday in the season, and I'll read a letter to the kids that hits on a particular topic that addresses something we need to speak about, because a lot of times hearing from a peer is so much more impactful than hearing the same words from me as their coach every day. So we'll share one of these letters to to hit on adversity or, overcoming adversity or dealing with a setback or motivation. And it becomes a really neat and easy way to give them an impactful pre-practice or post-practice talk and kind of hit on the things that you want to hit on. So this other stuff is some great stuff too. I don't have time to talk about it now. Like I said, I can shoot you that information, but I got to wrap up. So I'll tell you this. If I could give you one piece of advice with all this stuff, I love these coaching conferences and clinics. I have notebooks. It probably wouldn't surprise you. I have notebooks full of notes on this stuff. But the biggest problem I have with it, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate, is you take all these great notes, you get these great ideas in the summer, and then the notebook kind of sits on your shelf. And some of that stuff never gets implemented. So if I could give you one suggestion from anything you hear today, whether it's from myself or anyone else, start small. Don't try to do everything at once. All this stuff that I talked about came into being over time. Pick one thing and figure out what the first step is and execute on it. Is it doing research on poker chips? Is it talking to your coaching staff about core values? Pick one thing and actually take a concrete action. Because like I said, we are people, men and women of action. That's the biggest way that I've found to help make some of these great stuff I learn a reality. So like I said, I want to make sure that I give you guys a ton of value out of this. Like I said, you can shoot me, you can text me, you can email me your name and your email address, and I will get out to you all of today's slides, write up and step-by-step descriptions of all the tactics we talked about and all the ones we didn't talk about, and a bunch of other resources to help you out with this stuff. And also, guys, since I didn't have time for the Q&A right now, at least I think I got to end unless they want me to take some more time for the Q&A. You can add all of your questions, guys, and I will create a document with your questions and my answers to those questions and email that all out to you as well. So again, shoot me your information if you're interested. And thank you so much for your time, guys. Gene, I don't know if you want me to take your questions.
Thank you very much. WinSmarter.com. Hey, I could attest to this firsthand. I was there at Pete Jacobson's preseason meeting, the beginning meeting of the season. I was there. I presented on mindset, and I have to say it was absolutely loaded with parents, and it was absolutely loaded with wrestlers. It was well organized. He did a great job. It's been unbelievable. We worked with many of his athletes firsthand, one-on-one, spoke to the team. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about Clifford Wang, who is your state champ. He was on the Wrestling Mindset program. He went on to Harvard, and then he actually has a TED Talk. Talk a little bit about Cliff Wang. Yeah,
great. So Clifton graduated 17, I think it was, and he is like a great example of the type of kid that that really responds to this sort of stuff. He was a kid who wasn't very focused when he was younger. He wrestled from a young age, so he had that going for him. But he wasn't a great athlete. He wasn't super athletic. He wasn't very focused. And he was a little bit selfish, to be honest. And he had a lot of kind of self-doubt and confidence issues related to, again, putting too much value on the outcome. So he's a perfect kid who, by a combination of the hard work that he put in and the way that our culture helped kind of nurture and nudge him in the right direction, he really came into his own. And he certainly benefited from Wrestling Mindset, who helped continue to push him in that direction also, to the point where when he was a senior, he ended up as a New York State champion. He wrestled at 182 and he was like 9 pounds underweight, and still ended up knocking off the 1 seed. He got recruited to wrestle at Harvard. He actually put together, not only did he do a TED Talk, Gene, he actually put together a TED event at Edgemont schools. And he's doing that now at Harvard, where he gave his own TED Talk as part of that about what he learned from wrestling. And it's funny because he a lot of the lessons and a lot of the stuff we talked about today was like so like clearly reflected in his TED Talk. So it's on YouTube if anyone wants to Google it. His name is Clifton Wang TED Talk. So he's definitely one of a lot of success stories I could share with you guys.
Absolutely. And it's just nice that when we have that example, of course, you have the theory, but then we put some shoe leather on it and they can see how it took a kid from who was maybe immature, a little bit behind, got him up to speed, and not only brought him to success on the mats, but in the classroom and now in life. So we're real proud of Cliff, and no doubt large part because of you and because of the culture you set up there. We got a question from David Schuler over here. Best strategy for a team who has 3 head coaches in the past 4 years? Any thoughts, Pete Jacobson?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when I started coaching our program, it was in a similar situation, actually. And honestly, I think we all have seen this in other programs or even our own program, that a lack of continuity in coaching turnover can really just be like absolute like poison to the culture of a program. So to answer your question, I think you need to like start from scratch and build your own culture. I think you need to start by, so to me, one of the most fundamental things about coaching and building a strong culture is really getting clear on what your vision is for your program. Like, what is the ideal perfect program for you look like? What does it look like from a competitive standpoint? What does it look like from an academic standpoint, from a community standpoint? What is that experience like for your coaching staff? What is that experience like for your wrestlers? What is that experience like for the parents of your wrestlers? And literally, like, write it down. You don't need to write a novel. You can write down bullet points. But the whole thing here is, if we want to create a powerful, dominant, successful culture, we can't do that until we first define exactly what we want that culture to look like, right? It's like the GPS app on your phone. I love this analogy, right? A lot of technology goes into that, but it's a useless app. It's a useless application unless you can tell it where you want to go. And then it helps program the directions to get you there. So I think you got to start by deciding what you want it to look like. And then you can start laying out how you want to get there. I would say, and again, like, this is a long conversation. If you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to talk more at length with you about it. But I would say the next step is kind of getting clear on those core values, because once you know where you want to go, I think the next step is figuring out what you want your program to be all about. When you have those core values and they're well-defined, it helps. It's almost like guideposts to help you make decisions and it help you plan out the direction that you want to take things. So that would be my first 2 steps: setting a clear vision for yourself and figuring out kind of your core values, what you're all about. Obviously, there's a lot to it. Could be a whole presentation on its own, building a culture when you take over. But that would be my first 2 steps.
Excellent. And I love the idea of the poker chips. And for a lot of coaches out there, I know a lot of people at first maybe get skeptical. What is this? Is this a little bit weird or corny? Absolutely not. The New York Giants did this during their Super Bowl champion. They did something very similar with poker chips when they were having a losing season. Up until one point, they were having a losing record. And then what happened? They came back, won the Super Bowl championship, okay, from having a losing record at some point, like midway through the season. So it was a really big deal, and they did that also. So the point is this: the highest level athletes are doing it, the best ones. So if it works for them, and it's working for Pete's team, and it works for the teams that Pete works with, it's going to work for your team also. So don't be afraid to take some risks, take some chances. Like we said, the very best people, they're doing these kind of things. If you think you have all the answers, that means maybe you need to start changing your questions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, and I'll tell you, like, if you want to talk about like corny or, you know, or cheesy, like, I'll tell you, I'll be the first to admit, like, 23-year-old Pete would be super annoyed at 43-year-old Pete sitting here talking about poker chips in your program. I'd be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But I'll tell you what, like, I was at a point where but long before this, where I was like, all right, I don't know what else to do with these guys. I'll try anything to make us better. And that is honestly the impetus behind me taking, at least what at the time in my mind was going out on a limb, taking some chances with some like less orthodox stuff. And I'll tell you now, it's been game changing for our program. You know, like, we're dealing with kids that want to be part of something. They want to buy into something. They want to feel like they belong. And if you can tap into those things, like, to me, that's the secret to getting kids to commit and be motivated.
Yeah, and we speak about that all the time, that what separates good from great is coaches that are willing to do whatever it takes to be successful. Again, within not compromising our faith or morals, but we'll try something new. We're not afraid to have that white belt mentality where I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to try. And that's what helps take people over to the next level. So it really is great information. And one other thing I'll say is that when I did my master's degree thesis in exercise science, sports psychology, it was actually published in the International Journal of Wrestling Science. So everyone on this call should make sure they look into that. The International Journal of Wrestling Science. And what Pete Jacobson said right there was that big deal. The number one reason why people participate in sports, the number one reason kids participate is because it's fun. So it has to be fun. You need to keep the sport fun or people will drop off. Cale Sanderson and Kyle Dake said at the Pennsylvania Coaches Convention last year, they were the first and last presenter independently. They didn't hear one another, and they said the same exact thing. Sports have to be fun. There it is in the International Journal of Wrestling Science. You're hearing it from Pete Jacobson, Kyle Dake. You're hearing it from Cale Sanderson. So you got to take a page from the best.